I want to say welcome to Kokoro Conversations. My name's Alex Lang.
I'm Rebekah Anderson.
And this is season 2 of our talking together about different topics that we believe are important for living an intentional life. The Kokoro series, the original series, was built around this idea of topics that allow you to reconsider your life in very specific ways. And we're continuing on, and this conversation that we're going to have throughout this season is about ways that we can enhance our lives and really live the way that we want to live towards having a fulfilling life. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to be focusing on this season. So today, our first real topic is going to be adventure. The concept of when we have adventures, how we have adventures, why they're so important to our lives. And so I want to begin by asking you, what has been the best adventure of your life? Like, if you were gonna I'm sure you've had a lot of different adventures, but like, if you were gonna say hands down, best adventure I've ever had, what would it be?
Yeah, I have to say, 2 years ago, I was fortunate, or maybe it's 3 now. 3 years ago, I think I was able to go to Africa. I went to Kenya.
Whoa.
And it was a really unique adventure because you fly into Nairobi, and then I spent most of the week in this town that was about 7 hours outside of Nairobi, up in the mountains. It's this amazing town where a lot of Olympic runners actually come from because the elevation and altitude.
Is it the Maasai tribe? Is that who's there?
Oh gosh.
It's because I think they're the tribe that tends to live in that altitude.
It's possible that they're very close by. The town is Iten. And so I think you're right, though, at the Maasai tribe. But it was, you'd see people just running every morning. It was awesome, really inspiring. And I don't know, I think the quality of that made it such an incredible adventure was everything was completely different. The language actually wasn't that different. I will say that. Everyone in Kenya.
So what was it about it that made it so different?
Yeah, it was the culture, the way that people treated one another, the way our days went, the ability to see all of these animals, all of this landscape. I mean, we were up in the mountains just looking out over everything all week. And so there was this quality of being able to look out over one's life almost and see it in a very different way.
So what was a moment maybe that you remember from that was like, oh, this adventure, this made the adventure kind of what it was?
The last night that we were there before we flew back to the US, I can remember they kind of surprised us. I did not know that this was happening. They put us up in this very nice resort, which we'd had it wasn't a bad place to stay, but it was not fancy in any way. It was beautiful in its own way, but this was like a tourist attraction in a way that where we stayed throughout the week was not. And there was great food, but we got to go on a safari that was right outside of where we stayed. And so they take you in these vehicles and they open the top of your vehicle so you can look out and see everything. And I can remember you're allowed to stand in the vehicle, and this vehicle was moving really quickly. And I remember just standing up and kind of feeling the breeze as the vehicle moved and just looking out and just being so amazed by everything. It was like true awe at what I was looking at. I can remember In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel was in my head the whole trip. So I just felt like I was in a little movie that was just mine. It was beautiful though. The sun was setting. I was surrounded by an incredible group of people that I got to go with. And I was just kind of blown away by everything. But I'm curious, what is the best adventure you ever got to experience?
So I had finished my time at Oxford, and I had a really good friend. His name was JR. And he was like, hey, I want to go hike the Highland Way. I didn't know what it was, but I was like, yeah, man, I'll come with you. So we went up and we did that every day. So the way it works is that you do a trek, and the shortest is usually 9 miles. The longest, I think, is about 21, 22 miles. I mean, it can be pretty far that you go. So So we would go from place to place, and the terrain really changes in Scotland. Like, you think of Scotland kind of being one way because you see it in movies, but it can go from being very dry to very wet to forested to plains, and so you're kind of like always moving through that. And we hit it at a very nice time, because a lot of times in Scotland it's very cold and rainy. So that when we hit it, it was very nice. We only got like really a bad day of rain, like one day, and that was at the end. But I think the thing that was really beautiful about it, and I talk about this moment often because it was a moment that really kind of changed my life, was that we went into this forest you go into forests in the middle of it, and these forests are so thick, some of them, that even when it's daytime, it becomes like, when you're in the forest, it might as well be night. Like, it's literally, it blocks out 90% of the sun. And so you come into this forest, and it's like you went from like day, literally you're looking outside and it's bright, and then you go to like nighttime. And so we were walking through, and I stumbled in the brush, and these fireflies, like, that were kind of in there, and I assumed they were fireflies, but they had luminescence to them. They kind of rose up out of the thing, and they were everywhere. And it was this really beautiful moment. And I remember one landed in my hand, and it was kind of, I talk about these, what I call to be these overview effect moments. And the overview effect, of course, is from space, where they kind of have this breakdown. Astronauts will have this breakdown of themselves where they feel like they are one with the universe. And that was probably the first time in my life that I had an experience like that, where it was like we had been traveling, and there was a lot of things that came before it that led to that one moment. But when I hit the brush, it was just this really beautiful kind of, I was awestruck by it, like, by kind of what happened. And I remember just looking at this firefly that had landed in my hand and feeling, at one with it. And so, I would say that as an adventure, though, it was kind of, it's a little bit of what you talked about, which is that it was a total displacement, of kind of what I was used to. And I think that's an aspect of it. When you agree that, like, when you leave what you know, that's the aspect of adventure that kind of, it puts you in this totally different frame of mind. What was it when you were there? I'm interested to know, like, your sense of displacement to that, like, what was the disorientation that you felt around it?
I think in all of our lives, no matter what we're doing, if we're doing the thing we love most in the world, if it's just something we do every single day, we become quite myopic. We are just, so much of our life becomes focused on this tiny little thing. And it, in our mind, feels like it's the whole world. And then you go off and you have an adventure and you go, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff out here that I'd forgotten about. And that overview effect that you're talking about, you just become conscious for what can feel like a fleeting moment, but it's a fleeting moment that feeds you, I think, for a long time. And it's this conscious awareness that there's so much more in this world than you or me. There's this whole ecosystem that exists all the time.
The concept of adventure is very interesting, right? Because, you're talking about how we get into these ruts where we're like living our life, and we kind of just become we put on blinders and we kind of do the thing that we do. Now, what's interesting, though, is that as children, when we're growing, when we're like little, everything is that way. Everything is an adventure because it's all brand new to you. It's all something that you've never experienced before. So in that way, it's kind of always hitting you, I think, for a while, until you kind of come into consciousness of yourself, that even the simplest things are kind of adventures because it's a brand new way of being. I mean, you can think about it as simple as doing something that you've never done before, but you think about the stress of going to school for the first time when you're a child. Well, you might be going down the street, really, is all you're doing, but that experience, that is an adventure. It's something new that you have to take in. You're learning a culture, you're learning a way of being, right? But then we get to a point where we kind of understand the rules of life. We come to a place where we're set and we're settled a little bit more. So I'm interested to know what that feeling has been like for you as of late, because I feel like you're on this kind of of transitionary period that a lot of people end up going through in their life, where the adventures that you once had kind of all the time maybe are becoming a bit less than they were before. So I'm interested to know about what's happening with you with that right now. And do you feel that sense of normalcy setting in a way that it hasn't before?
It is interesting as you get older because I think one of the amazing things that you see if you're around kids, they look at a cloud in the sky and it's like the most amazing thing that they've ever seen. And I'm always grateful, even as I've gotten older, become more anchored, seen more things. You kind of like, you become so jaded about things where nothing really feels exciting, especially if you're in a mode of life where you are just every day feels so the same. So I think I find myself a little bit sad knowing that the older I get, the less thrilled by new experiences I might be. And at the same time, I hold on hope that I will retain a childlike sense of joy at simple things because I can even remember recently I was just driving down the main road in this town where we live and I saw a guy sitting, he was an older gentleman just sitting on the front steps, like just looking up. And I saw him for just a second, but I still see him fresh in my eyes because I could tell he was just taking in the joy of being outside and looking and watching cars pass, which when you're a kid, that's like the most fun thing in the world, just to watch all the cars pass and try and get somebody's attention or something like that. And seeing him reminded me of that. And so I still think as we get older, we find in some ways less ability to experience the joy and wonder of those small things. We find less room in our lives for adventure and less capacity to appreciate the possibility for adventure that exists every day. And yet, I do think it's still there if we're willing to find it.
Yeah, I think the part that you bring up that's really critical to that is this concept of childlike wonder. That if you're I think as adults, one of the things that happens is our lives become routinized. And I think that it becomes more routinized the more responsibilities you take on. So, if you take on a really big job, oftentimes that requires a great deal of your time and your effort, and then add into that a relationship, and then add into that children, right? Now, all of your time is mostly accounted for. And, your days are set. You're moving, you have to execute things on the job, and then you have to execute things within your relationship. You have to execute things to make sure people are fed and taken to the right places, all these things. So the ability for you to be able to experience life outside of your routine is extraordinarily, it narrows very quickly over time. And I think what happens is we make these choices, we take on these responsibilities, and we do so, I think, willingly because we think, okay, this is something that I want to do. It's going to bring meaning and fulfillment to my life. And I think that within those, you can have these adventures. You can have adventures within those within those responsibilities, for sure. But I think it's a tension that exists where if the responsibility feels too heavy, okay, well, I gotta do this again. I'm gonna have to drive. I gotta drive my child to school. Or I gotta drive them to this event. Or I have to do these things. You get overwhelmed by the sense of responsibility, and you lose the sight for the novelty and the adventure that can come within those moments that happen. Because we're talking about, when we started, we talked about the concept of an adventure that is the adventure itself is from displacement. It's from something that you haven't done before, right? That's where adventure generally starts.
It breaks the monotony of what you're talking about in our lives.
Absolutely. So the problem is that when we say, when was the last time you had an adventure? What did your mind go to? What did my mind go to? It went to something that is not within our routines. That's outside of what we have. It's like, oh, when I did this big thing that wasn't part of my normal life.
Right.
The problem is that for a lot of people, that sense of finding adventure because of the routine goes away.
Right.
Or the ability to find it because you're just living. You're like working, like those responsibilities become so heavy that the concept of going on an adventure almost feels too much.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
oh, that's one more thing.
Yeah.
Like, how am I possibly gonna fit an adventure in when I've gotta get my kid to
Right.
soccer practice and then go grocery shopping and then try and fit a workout in and all these
Right.
things.
Like, yeah, it's like one more thing to plan.
Ex
And then it's not even an adventure because adventures happen to you often without you even like expecting it sometimes. Like that's the best adventures when you do something. I mean, in movies, right? Every movie that's a great movie is the adventure happens without them planning for it. It just kind of occurs, right? It happens to them as opposed to like, we're going on an adventure and we're gonna
Yeah.
do this thing, right?
Well, and it's interesting too because I happen to be a person who like I really enjoy a solid sense of routine. Like I'm really annoying in that way in some ways. Like I can remember being in college. I went to college at like 20 minutes from the beach. And I remember a friend of mine was like, "Do you want to go to the beach?" And I was like, "I can't. Nope. Because if I go to the beach, I will have fun and I will want to go back and I need to study. I need to focus on my studies and just be in the library and not have fun. Because if I do, I'll want to keep having fun and that will keep
And
me
then
from
that's
being
it.
a
And
good
then and then
student."
and then I'm never gonna make it.
Yeah,
And
it's a terrible quality, but it means I'm a workhorse, which often serves me, and it keeps a monotony in your life. Like, I feel good when I've achieved a lot. And then I can remember I've been so fortunate that I've had friends that have they've helped me to understand I can have fun and still do well in my work. In fact, having fun might even increase my capacity to work well. So I can remember like a day in the summer when I had a day off in college. Some friends reached out at like 8 in the morning, like, "Hey, I'm free today. What do you guys want to do anything?" And I had been thinking, I haven't been to the west coast of the state. I kind of want to drive over there and see the beaches. And fortunately, we just were able to like head out and go do that together. And it was like a real adventure in the truest sense. We didn't plan where we were going to stop. We found fun places along the way we wouldn't have expected. And that quality of spontaneity
Yes.
that our lives need.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
and I think you're bringing up kind of the biggest issue that we face as human beings is that we crave routine. Most of us really want routine and we need that routine to feel kind of grounded in our lives.
Yes.
But to feel fulfilled, you need adventure in your life. If you don't have adventure in your life, you're losing an element of fulfillment that you're not going to the people who get to the end of their lives, and you know this because you've done a lot of funerals. I've done a lot of funerals. What I find is the people who have had the best lives, almost always hands down, is they figure out ways to create spontaneity in their life where they sit there and they say, you know what? They've been doing the thing. They're like, let's just go do this thing. And I always love it when I hear their kids or their grandchildren say, yeah, like my grandpa would just call me and be like, hey, do you want to go just do this thing?
Yeah.
And then, like my mom would be like, no, we have to do this. And he's like, no, I'm going to take him, just pick him up and go. Right. And that brings this level of fulfillment because it's taking you out of what you know to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a sense, it does exactly the thing we're talking about in Kenya, exactly the thing I'm talking about on the West Highland Way, but you're doing it within your normal life, and you need that.
Right.
If you don't do that, eventually you're going to wake up one day and be like, oh my God, I spent my whole life in the library. Like I never had fun because I was so focused on this thing that at the end of the day, right? Like, and I think you would agree with me, like getting good grades and learning or doing a job, right? That's important. It's a wonderful thing to do. But if you look back and you say to yourself, well, I have all these things, like you can put them up on the shelf and say, look at what I have, but you never experienced life,
Oh,
what's the point?
Well, and I have to say, one of the things that drove me the craziest in my educational experiences was, you sit and you read and you read and you read, and you become so familiar with these deep ideas and concepts. And then you go and you have no capacity to test their actual practical limits in the world. And so when you're around people who just confine themselves to ideas and never actually go out into the world and see how those ideas actually work in lived experience, you find people who are just like, they're so annoying to me to be around. I'm like, you care so much about this idea that has no bearing on how people live their lives. And that to me is so upsetting, that you can sit here and think that some concept is the
Well,
rule.
and I think that even, let's get outside of academia, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that people can have that same attitude towards whatever it is their job. This corporation that I work for, this thing that I do for them, this product that I'm building, this product that I'm launching, whatever it is that I'm doing as my work, that's the thing that matters. When in reality, that's not the thing that matters.
Right.
Like what matters is that you that and I've really come to believe this to be true, and it's become more apparent to me in the last couple of years more than anything else, which is that anything that you're doing as a job, let's just put it that way, or anything that you're doing that's part of sustaining yourself in terms of life, paying for things, that ultimately those things need to push you towards experiences. That if it's not providing for an experience, if you're earning money and it's not giving you the opportunity to have experiences in your life, or you're not taking the opportunity to have those experiences, that's the problem. That's a problem. Like that you're missing a whole component of your life that really you need to embrace, because truthfully, there's no point in focusing so much on one thing when you're never really experiencing what life has to offer. And really you have to force displacement onto yourself to
Yes.
be able to have wonderful to really enjoy life, to find fulfillment. Because if you don't have displacement, it won't work.
Well, we kind of have to have these adventures to figure out where we truly belong. And that means trying something, seeing if it works, and if it doesn't, continuing to go out and try new things. But I think beyond that, I loved one of my favorite books I read last year was called Stretch by an author named Scott Shine. And I loved it so much because he talked about the way that in our culture now, we are so pushed towards specializing. So if you want to get a PhD, you study a very niche concept for 7 or 8 years, and you have to be so myopic, focused solely on that, because anything that's outside of that, it's not going to increase your expertise. So we have people who are skilled in one area only, and then they don't really have a deep well from which to pull from. And what you're talking about, I think, like the corporate world where you can get so sucked under the tide of whatever ideology they have that you stop kind of seeing other people in the world and seeing how they think. It's not helpful usually to even like the mentality that that corporation wants you to have, because really seeing things from lots of different perspectives enables creativity. And so I think that relates to adventure, because the novelty and the different kind of circumstances that even the smallest of adventures creates, it helps us to see the world from a different point of view, and it's good for our souls, but it's also usually a very good thing for whatever job we have too. I know that like experiences that you've had as a swimmer have enhanced all of your work, writing and speaking. I mean, all of these experiences, every adventure we have kind of comes together and makes us better. It's unfortunate because the way that we are beaten into
Yeah.
our things, it makes it impossible.
Well, in culture today, we're also getting very siloed. And I think that that's the one thing about displacement and like doing things spontaneously and trying to push yourself out, is that you know, I notice that as I get older,
Mhm.
I have a tendency to only talk to people who I've known. And so I find myself falling more and more into an echo chamber. And in the last couple of years, something that I've really pushed myself to do is if an opportunity comes up for me to go out and leave and do something different, I'll go do it because oftentimes I meet people who I wouldn't normally talk to. And those people really enhance my life because now I'm seeing things from a very different perspective. Now, does that mean I love everybody I encounter? No, but sometimes I meet people and I think, oh, wow, this is a person I would never usually interact with. And yet they've brought something to me that has made me rethink my life in a kind of a fundamental way. And that's happened a number of times over the last couple of years where I've made this my mantra of take opportunities when they come to you, don't pass them up, use it as a potential or a potential opportunity for you to go out and be spontaneous. And that spontaneity may last a day. I mean, it may not be very long. It may be 24 hours of doing something different. But the truth is that spontaneity provides this like little tiny sense of adventure. I don't have to get, I'm not having to spend, I don't spend $3,000 to get on a plane, to go somewhere to a foreign country to feel displaced. And that's a beautiful if you have the resources to do that. But I can take a day out of my life and I can travel and be with people who are different and try something different. And it's not too hard to do. It just takes the effort to want to do that. And I think that now I'm at a place in my life where I realize if I don't do that, I'm not going to be fulfilled. That I'm going to look back on my life and say, I should have done more of that. And I don't want to have that regret in my life.
No. Yeah, and I think so many people do, unfortunately. I think that's something that there are two things that everything you're saying is making me think. One is there are so many people who don't get the opportunity to have those kinds of adventures. And the other is you can't just sit around and wait for those adventures to come. Sometimes you really have to make an effort and seek them out. And I know that the place in life where I'm at, I mean, I am at that point where I have like enough of an anchor that just going to a couple towns away and walking around feels like a great adventure to me. So maybe that says something about my life not being quite adventurous enough, but I've just learned to appreciate small things as adventures.
Well, it's kind of like going back to that childlike wonder, right?
Yeah.
You have to return to that, which leads me to my last question, which is what's the adventure that you want to have in the future that you haven't had? Is there an adventure in your mind that you're like, you know what? I want to go do that thing. And there's something that I've really been wanting to do, but I haven't had a chance to do it.
Well, we talked so much about it. This was in our time episode. We talked a lot about these places that we really want to go. And I know that something I want to do is to explore the world. But I also am so conscious that I'm a perfectionist. I like to do things and do them well. I did ballet for like 15 years and then I didn't dance for like 10 in between. And before I went to take an adult ballet class, I like stretched and got myself ready for like 3 months. It was like some part of me couldn't just go and do that.
Yeah.
I want to go try something and be bad at it. I want to find the strength in myself and the courage to go and not be good at something. And I think maybe that was partly inspired by the fact that in that dance class, there was this woman who is like in her 60s who had never danced before. And she went and she tried it. And I just like I could see childlike wonder in her. It was almost like seeing a little girl taking a child. Actually, she's probably more joyful than the little girls in those classes because oftentimes their parents want them there.
Yeah.
She really wanted to be there and she didn't care that she didn't know how to do certain steps. She had the courage to say, I don't know how to do this. Show me. And I thought, man, that is like the pinnacle of bravery to me. So I think I have a little bit more of that willingness to fail in me than I ever had. But I think going and trying something like that would be amazing for me.
Yeah.
What about you, though?
Yeah, for me, I would say the biggest thing that I wanna do, and this will probably happen, I'm hoping in 20 years, but, in 20 years, I think that the cost of going into space will be probably low enough that I could afford a ticket for it. Right now, it's way, way out of my price range, but I wanna save up, and that's something that I wanna do before I die, is I wanna go into low Earth orbit. I mean, that's probably where you can go to, and experience like being in space, being weightless. I want that one time in my life to be able to do that. I'm so obsessed with learning about space and the universe. It's like probably one of the most beautiful things to me is like understanding about the cosmos that we live in. And so to have had the experience one time of being able to go to space, even if it's just briefly, would be is kind of it's kind of the ultimate adventure that I really want to have at some point. And so that's my hope.
Do you think, and I admittedly don't know that much about like commercial space travel yet, but will you be able to like look and see Earth and
Yes.
experience the overview effect?
I'd possibly, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, in low Earth orbit, you can do that. So you would be kind of closer to the level of, I mean, probably not quite that high, but you'd be closer to the level of like the International Space Station. And so the hope is that it'll get cheaper and better, and we'll have more, we'll have more opportunity to do that, and it'll be more available to the public. So that's something that I'm hoping for, and yeah, I'm interested in. So I hope that you all have uh, found this to be somewhat interesting. And I'm interested to know in the comments your sense of adventure, the adventures that you've been on. I think I'm very interested to know kind of what adventures you want to have. But even more importantly, just remember that in order for you to really have fulfillment in life, you need to just retain a little bit of that sense of childlike wonder and find spontaneity in little ways. Remember, you don't have to go to space. You don't have to take a big trip to a foreign country. You can do it right where you are if you're willing to look at the world in a slightly different way. And I think that's super important to break out of the monotony of life. And it's super important so that you can see the world for all that it has to offer, rather than sometimes allowing the world to dictate how you feel. And sometimes that feeling can feel like my life has been too constricted. So we're hoping for the best for you in that way. And we're looking forward to having more of these conversations. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Have wonderful adventures. We'll see you next time.
Bye.